This is about the movement possibilities of your feet. And in another sense, it is a metaphor of possibilities of movement. Through the exploration and through the cross, you find out the way you can move within the cross. So it's 4 squares, and the only rule that the cross setting is the structure, the geometry of the cross, providing 4 squares, and with yourself starting initially within the 2 quadrants of the square. The only task or game is to explore the possibilities of movement within this limitation, and hopefully figuring out the potentials and possibilities of this particular limitation together with the possibilities and opportunities of the structure of your leg and feet and body, and the way it can potentially play within the structure of this cross. It is a metaphor also because it illustrates the more general tendencies of patterns being the limitations of situations and patterns being set up, and finding yourself within the certain structure of limitation, and the process of figuring out the possibilities within the limitation. So there is at least 2 things going on here. One is the enjoyment of finding the possibilities that were not expected within the limitations of a particular, let's call it, game. And another is simultaneously this, let's call it, game is echoing across the other situations and modalities in the past, present, and future. So to give an example, while I'm playing with this cross and with my feet, I am reminded of the games and board of the chess, or even more of the game of a Go, and the movements on these boards that also have to do with limitations and possibilities. But I'm also reminded of other things that are maybe in some sense more abstract, but also can be transposed more concretely, such as, for instance, insight that I had with this cross is about the birth of a certain rhythm of steps that I assume became later part of the any traditional dance. So the rhythm is born once there is a pattern that is repeated. My insight was, for instance, with this pattern of the movement within the cross that is forward, that is neutral, and that is backward. So we have assertion, we have a neutrality, and we have a passivity or retreat. Assertion, neutrality, retreat. The dance, which is a very specific dance, now becomes a metaphor of all kinds of dances, of dance with words, dance between people. It is the very abstract ideas of assertion, of advancement, of holding the space, of being in the neutrality, and of a retreat. So, and this is the cross then becomes a tool on quite a few levels. One of them is very specific, is to, while playing this game, you find new ways of movement with your feet. You find new feelings of weight distribution that are not very common in your everyday life. For instance, normal walking, you would be walking from one quadrant to the other. While introducing the different patterns, you experience different ways of movement, and you expand the repertoire of movement that you can bring it to everyday life. Why? Because it expands the way you can move, and when you have a bigger choice of movement, you have a bigger degree of freedom. You have a bigger variety to choose from how to relate to this world, and in this particular sense, how to relate this world with this environment through the movement. But since it also functions as a metaphor, these specific findings, for example, in this game, produce insight that allows to transpose certain ideas into other things, other modalities, across many things, from relationships, from to making music, to talking to people, to looking at the world. The patterns, in other words, the patterns, they contain implicitly a lot of information. Insight is the experience of this specific information being transposed into other modalities of thought and life. This is why the cross can be one of the games to explore both the movements of your feet, but also more general patterns. For lack of better words, kind of archetypal patterns that cut across modalities of different skills, different thought patterns. And for example, what I'm talking about could be the pattern of yin and yang, which is one of those meta patterns that can be transposed into many modalities and found. So yes, this is what is the movement games about. This is what I just said maybe doesn't make sense, and I'm just interested in my pink socks now and the cross, which is can be later extended into a double cross and triple cross. So I invite you in exploring this apparently very simple pattern game and finding yourself out what it is produces, because I assert that within this quadrant, and we're not even starting to play with expanding it to multiplying the pluses into make it expanding it further, but even within this form you start to get using your feet, you start to get the amount of possibilities start to multiply, and it's like the cross becomes like a generator of new patterns and new ideas, like a tool to play with. And of course, probably if you're a dancer, for you this is very familiar and you relate to this. For those who are not, it could be a really new experience, new finding, even if it's just about the possibilities of movement. And since you have on the streets you have lots of squares like that, it gives you ideas how you can move and play in your city, on the streets, in your office, and look crazy, but not too crazy that they would lock you up. Thank you for your attention.